Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Um, Welcome to this session. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about community and civic engagement here at the University of Michigan. We're really excited to talk to y'all and to share some of the really amazing things that are happening here, both on campus and in the community. And so you are going to be spoken to by two Danielles. We'll introduce ourselves in a second, and then we'll go ahead and get started with some of the content, making sure that we leave some time towards the end for questions. And so we'll talk for, I would say, maybe about 20, 25 minutes, probably a little less than that. And then we'll leave some time for open questions. Of course, you know that you can use the Q&A feature. And so you can put your questions in the little box there. And Danielle will be sharing those questions and answering them as well. And so let's start with a quick round of introductions, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Danielle. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Assistant Director for Student Learning and Leadership at the Ginsberg Center for Community Service and Learning, where we are the campus's civic and community engagement space. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means in a moment, but I'll let Danielle introduce herself.
Hi, I'm the other Danielle. I'm Danielle Norman. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a graduate student at the School of Social Work, and I help out on Ginsberg's academic partnerships team. And I actually discovered Ginsberg through a couple of ways. One was in my undergrad career, I took a community-based research and Detroit partnership class, and that was a really wonderful experience. And I've also been involved through Ginsberg's Community Technical Assistance Collaborative Program, which is also a great program if you're a graduate student. So looking forward to talking with you all today.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. We're just going to keep milking that as we go on. So today, if you want to go to the next slide, Danielle, we are going to talk a little bit about your new home for community and civic engagement. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different ways that you can get involved. Like I said, leaving a lot of time at the end. The good thing is that there are lots and lots of ways for people to get engaged here on campus and in the community. And so to start off really quickly, the University of Michigan is located in Ann Arbor, as you know, which is in Southeast Michigan. And what we are really fortunate to have is amazing community partners and amazing opportunities for students to get involved both on campus and in community. Just like students are learning from really amazing and distinguished faculty members in the classroom, there are incredible community leaders that are the heads of organizations and initiatives in our area, and there are students who are learning from them as well. I think that as I've worked at the university, a lot of students will talk about both in some of their recommendation letters for graduate school or things that they're doing afterwards, or even just reflecting towards the end of their experience, that the things that they did off campus really enriched the things that they were doing on campus as well. And so a lot of our work is really to help students feel connected, engaged, and prepared to work with community members to extend the learning that they're doing in the classroom. So like I said, there are lots of different opportunities. We will talk about a number of them. I do want to name that there are programs at the Ginsberg Center. There are programs at the University of Michigan in all of the different schools and colleges. And there are student organizations that feature community engagement in some way, shape, or form. And so we will talk about those. And I would love to answer questions. If you tell me what you're interested in, we can make sure that we get you connected to the programs, people that are doing that work here on campus or in the community. So, if you want to go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different ways that service that you might have done before coming to the university might be different than what you might have opportunities to connect with at the University of Michigan. And so the data shows us that about 90% of students that are coming in have done some sort of community service or volunteer work before the university, which is really great. I think that a lot of what that work looks like sometimes is kind of like maybe you're in National Honor Society or you're in Beta Club, you were doing some of these more mainstream volunteer pieces, maybe cleaning a park, maybe doing a shift at a nursing home. And all of those things are really important. There are really significant ways that you can contribute to your community. And there are some other things too. And so we have this concept, or this, I would say, conceptualization of community engagement. That is the pathways for civic engagement and community change. Lots of C words there. And so in those different pathways, we want you to think beyond community service. Direct service, like I said, is really important, but there are other ways for you to contribute to sustainable communities as well. So one is policy and governance, where you're participated in the democratic process. You might be doing policy work, you might be connecting with people, you might be learning, or even attending a city council meeting. Those different pieces of how you learn about and how you connect to what's happening in terms of policy and governance, that those are important ways to creating change in communities. And all of these are really just, how do we create change that is going to be positive and that is going to be sustainable, and that gives people access to what they might need in life. And so lots of different ways for students to be connecting to those. The next is community engaged learning and research. And Danielle talked a little bit about that in her introduction, that there are ways for you to do in-class learning while still contributing to community. And U of M has a really great history and legacy of that work with things like Project Community and Project Outreach. And so there are some different ways that you can enrich your learning and inform your action through coursework, through academic research, or through other learning opportunities as well. And seeing those and the learning that comes from that as things that can contribute to community. The next is philanthropy. That's maybe one that feels a little bit more familiar, where you might be donating funds. That's definitely one thing. It could also be other resources that are going to contribute to the public good. And so there are multiple organizations on campus that are doing philanthropy work. There's also an internship that students can take that is based in philanthropy and development. And so that's something that you can be thinking about as well. The next is direct service. Like I said, that's what people are most used to. There are so many different opportunities. Like I said, we'll talk about those in a moment, for people to do some of that more immediate individual addressing of community needs through those direct interactions. And so those are things that you can find in the classroom, in student organizations, but really thinking about maybe that more traditional way that we think about service, where you are working personally with others, meeting different clients or participants' needs with organizations. The next is community organizing and activism. A lot of times people don't necessarily think about this as community engagement or service, but we want to make sure that you know that these are important ways for us to contribute to the community. The ways that we might evolve, educate, or mobilize other people to create attitude changes, policy changes, or even cultural changes in ways that are going to be life-giving to other people, that those are things that we see as important ways to contribute as well. And then the last one is social entrepreneurship, where people might be using some of the different ethical, business, or market-oriented approaches to create change that is positive in communities. And so the Ross School of Business has a number of different social entrepreneurship programs. The College of Engineering has a number of them as well. And then there's a plenty of student organizations that are doing some work that features social entrepreneurship in them as well. So like I said, no shortage. Every school or college has things along these pathways. But again, wanting us to get past this, oh, well, I'm just thinking about community service as doing a park cleanup or doing a single day of service, and to really think about all the different ways that you might do it. And I've also seen that for some students, once they kind of get to college, they're being pulled so many different directions that maybe the old way of doing service doesn't really work for them. And that's okay. We encourage students to think about some of these other ways that might help to reinvigorate your interest in your commitment to community. And on our website, the ginsberg.umich.edu pathways, that is something that where people can learn more about those different pathways. And there's even a little quiz that will be live later this fall, where you can learn more about, hey, is this a pathway that I'm interested in? And ask you some questions to maybe help you figure out which ones work for you. And so those are, that's one of the ways that I would say that service is maybe a little bit different here at Michigan than it might have been before coming to campus. Danielle, if you want to go to the next question or the next slide. So the next slide talks about the way that we do service. And so I know that for me, I was in Beta Club. That was a lot of the service that I had done in high school before I got to college. And a lot of it was just kind of showing up and doing what people said and telling people kind of like what I could contribute. And there wasn't really a lot of, I would say, deep learning to that. It wasn't until I got to college that I started to ask some deeper and more meaningful questions. For this, we want students to know that what you do matters. We really do want, of course, that's why we're here. We want students to get engaged, but we also want you to think about how you do it. How you do it matters as well. And so because of that, we promote different principles like developing relationships in community as things that make our work a lot more meaningful and a lot more sustainable. We also want you to think about how things like listening to others also helps to make the work more sustainable. A lot of times students come to spaces and some of that learning is, how do I ask the questions in a way that are going to help me to be able to meet community identified needs, instead of me going into a space and saying, here's what I think is wrong, here's what I think you need to fix, but how do I, in relationship with other people, identify some of the different community articulated priorities and work towards those in community as well. And so those are two things that I think are really important to us, is expanding the way that we think about service and thinking about the ways that we do service in community. And so do we have any questions yet, Danielle? No questions?
No questions yet.
Perfect, thank you. So to go to our next slide, we'll talk a little bit about, okay, Danielle, you've talked about different ways to think about service. You've talked about the principles on how you do it. So like, what do I do now? I want to talk about 3 different ways that you can kind of think about getting involved. One is Ginsberg Center programs. And so we'll give you a little spiel about what the Ginsberg Center is. We'll talk about University of Michigan programs that students can be involved with. And then we'll also talk about some of the community engaged student organizations as well. All of these are going to be really important and helpful ways for students to connect to community and to the university. Recognize that as we think about what learning experiences look like, if you stay in the classroom, you will learn so much. And if you stay in the classroom, you will miss out on so much more learning. And so wanting students to really think about how can you enrich your U of M experience by being involved, by getting connected to things that are happening in the community, particularly if you're someone that cares a lot about social issues. If you're someone that sees them on Twitter or sees them on Instagram, that's great, but this gives you an opportunity for you to do some of those things in real life and to connect to some of the really incredible initiatives that we have happening locally. So let's talk about the Ginsberg Center first. So this is a picture of the Ginsberg Center in person. I'm actually in the center right now. We have been gone for a very long time and we're excited to be back in person and to engage with folks in a safe and sometimes distant, sometimes really close together way. We're still kind of figuring out what those things look like for community engaged experiences. And I can talk to y'all about what that might mean as well. But this is what the Ginsberg Center looks like. It's an adorable old house that's right on the south of campus. Love to have students stop by and see the work that we're doing and just to get to know us a little bit more. And so in the center, we do a lot of work supporting, and you can go to the next slide, Danielle. We do a lot of work connecting community organizations to students and faculty. So the faculty at the University of Michigan are doing some really incredible work. Some of their research, some of their courses might connect to community initiatives. And so we do a lot of that connecting work. We also connect student organizations and individual students to some of the initiatives that are happening in community as well. And so as you think about all the different incredible things that are happening at U of M, the initiatives, the resources, the learning, the Ginsberg Center is all about how do we connect those things to the priorities and needs that exist in our external communities. And so the thing that we'll kind of talk a little bit about today is the student piece of that. So yes, we have really good and important relationships with the incredible community organizations that we have locally in kind of the Southeast Michigan Ann Arbor area. We also have really rich relationships with faculty and staff that are trying to connect their work to community. But the work that we do, and you can see how excited I get because this is the body of work that I work with, is connecting students to those things, seeing the ways that students develop leadership and learn not just for today, but for the rest of their lives in community. Those are the things that we try to cultivate. And so there's lots of different ways that students can be doing those things. So if you want to go to that next slide, Danielle. If we're thinking about some of the different Ginsberg Center programs, we have a number of programs, and these are just some of the ones that speak specifically to incoming first-year students. We have for this year, we're going to actually be piloting this, a first year community engagement cohort, where first year students will kind of be in community together, and they'll be learning a little bit about community engagement. Some of the things that I kind of had to rush through earlier, they're going to get to dig into those things, get to develop community with each other, get to actually go places and see some of the different initiatives that I've talked about that are happening in community, and really just trying to kind of find your people on campus. This campus is pretty big, and so we know that finding kind of a cohort would be a really great way for students to learn about each other, meet different people, and get connected to community right away. The next is America Reads. And so if a student is work study eligible, this is a really incredible way for students to get those work study funds, because they'll be doing tutoring in schools that are in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, which is the city right next to Ann Arbor, and the city of Detroit. All of these things can happen virtually or in person. Of course, we know that K-12 schools are going to have some virtual and in-person options. And so tutors are going to be able to do some really important learning with students, helping them to learn to read, and to read in ways that are going to allow them to be successful academically. The next is Readers Invest. So this is a different literacy program where students are going to, in some ways, maybe go into schools. We're still learning about what that will look like for area schools now, knowing that for a lot of students, one of the best indicators for their literacy is having people read to them. And so in this way, we have students and faculty and staff from the university go to different schools and read live in classrooms. There are also some virtual options as well, as we know that not every child is going to be in schools this fall, and not every student might feel comfortable going to schools. And so there will be options for both. The next one is Michigan Active Citizens Alternative Spring Break Program. I love this program. It's something that I did when I was in college. Instead of going to, going up north for spring break or going somewhere else, students will go to different places around the country and engage in service with community organizations that they've been kind of working with throughout the year. And so doing some of that hands-on work, doing some of that learning work in community and small groups, I would say I have some really great memories of doing some of that work in New Orleans, trying to address some of the impacts of Hurricane Katrina, and know that the students that I work with Alternative Spring Break here talk a lot about the ways that the service that they're doing and the ways they're engaging in community there have really shaped their college experience here at U of M. And then the last one that I would say for Ginsberg Center programs is the Detroit Partnership. This is a program where students are working with community organizations in the city of Detroit on a weekly basis, but then they also have a really big Detroit Partnership Day in the spring, where students will go to Detroit and work with different community organizations for one day, hoping that that will be an on-ramp to continued engagement in the city of Detroit as well. So those are Ginsberg Center programs. I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up about those different programs, but I want to also tell you about some other things that the university has more broadly. So we are one center, and we are a powerful center. We do a lot of really incredible work, and we would love for you to join us, but we are one space in a really large university. And so I want to make sure you know about some other things that exist at the university as well. So here are some, and I emphasize some of the different community engaged programs that U of M has to offer. I'm not going to go over all of them because no one wants that, but I will just point out a couple of them that I think are really incredible and want students to look into. Project Community is a really great course-based program where students are learning about sociology while also doing work in community. I would say that the Public Service Internship Program is really incredible as well, where they provide support for students that are wanting to do public service and doing that in the Washington, D.C. area. The Community Action and Social Change minor is a minor. So it's a co-curricular minor that students can kind of engage with through the School of Social Work, where they're learning all about what it means to be engaged actively in community. And then the Center for Socially Engaged Design, that center is actually in the College of Engineering, and they focus on how do we do design work? How do we create things, create technologies, create processes that are going to be able to meet the dynamic needs that we have in communities? So those are just 4 of the programs that exist, and those are all in 4 different schools and colleges. So there's lots of opportunities. And if you let me know a school or college, I could also potentially, depending on which one it is, point you in the direction of a community engaged opportunity that they have. And then if you want to go to the last one, so we talked about Ginsberg Center programs, we talked about broader U of M programs and initiatives. And so now we have student organizations. you've probably heard this before, you will continue to hear it. U of M has a really vibrant student organization culture. We have lots of student orgs, and over 500 of them have service or service learning as a component of what they do. Really encourage students to think about the different ways they might want to engage with some of those student organizations. We know that after the last year and a half, student orgs are really, really eager to invite new members and to have people they're gonna, add some new blood, some new excitement into their organizations. And so definitely look into those. There are lots of opportunities for you to learn about those orgs. Festival and Northfest are two student organization fairs that people can be going to. There will also be a student organization fair called So Cool, So Just that the Ginsberg Center sponsors with the School of Social Work. And there, if you're specifically interested in social change and social justice organizations, that's a way for you to learn about some of those as well. On this slide, I put just a few. Like I said, there's over 500 of them. And so these are just a few that the Ginsberg Center has worked with. And so opportunities to educate children and Music Matters for the most part do some really great tutoring work. And so if you're interested in doing some tutoring or connecting to children in schools, those are organizations that do really cool things. Music Matters also does a really big thing that they call Spring Fest, where students learn about the different community engaged opportunities, but there are also concerts and food trucks and really great things that they have there too. So Music Matters is definitely an incredible organization for students to get involved with. Books for a Benefit does some really great philanthropy work, connecting books to different communities that need more resources, specifically around literacy. The Roosevelt Institute might be for folks that are wanting to do some work around policy. It is a student policy think tank, but they do a lot of socially engaged projects. And then also the Michigan Refugee Assistance Program, filled with students that are trying to do some really incredible work connecting refugees in the area to the resources that they need to thrive. And so, like I said, there's so many more, but that's just a few of the different organizations that exist. And so that was pretty quick, went through a lot of information there. Of course, want you to take that all in and let us know what questions come up for you. But if we could give you a piece of homework, yeah, you can go to that slide, Danielle. If we can give you a piece of homework, if you think about how you want to engage as you come to the University of Michigan, if you become a student and a member of our community, Connect the Community is a really great database that gives you real-time information about the different volunteer opportunities that exist. And so if you go to that website and create a profile, oh, sorry, I think I might have had my hand over the mic. If you go to the Connect to Community website and you create a profile, you can select what your interests are, what some of the different things that you might be wanting to explore are, and you can find engagement opportunities in our area. And so connecting to some of the different, like I said, incredible organizations and initiatives that are here, that's a really great way to start to see some of those things. And so that was a lot of information. Danielle, you can go to that last slide. We would love to hear any questions that come up for you, but then also knowing that things are a little bit, virtual, maybe a little distant right now. If there are questions that come up for you about the community, about Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, about the university, we'd be happy to answer those too as we're able, of course. This is a large institution, and so if there are things that come up, we can maybe point you in the right direction.
Yeah, Danielle, so we actually already have a question about alternative spring break. Someone wants to know, how can we become involved with alternative spring break? Is there an organization we need to join? Can we just sign up, or just how does that process look?
Yeah, so for alternative spring break, there are a couple of organizations that exist on U of M's campus that do their own kind of alternative spring break. And so there might be some student organizations doing that. But the MAC ASB program that the Ginsberg Center sponsors, they'll have like an open sheet for people to indicate their interest. They also have a website. And so if you go to Maze Pages, I'm not sure if you all have kind of heard about Maze Pages, but that's really the directory for student organizations and programs on campus. And if you connect to the organization that way, you'll get some of those different updates, and you can sign up for that in the fall. The applications are typically due in October, and so you'll have a lot of time between now and then to learn more about the program, and you would just apply for it. They'll select members, and then they'll let you know kind of where you're going and what you're going to be doing in community as well. Okay.
Awesome. Someone else would like to know if there's an email list they can join to receive news and opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. That's the good thing about some of these pieces being online is that I can point you in the direction of it. I can even put the link in the chat for you. At least I'm pretty sure I can.
I think you can if you do drop down to all panelists and attendees in the chat.
Thank you. So that is it says weekly. We send it out to every 2 weeks. We send out a regular newsletter that have updates and opportunities both on campus and off campus, and let people know what some of the really incredible things that are happening in the area are. So that's one way that you can learn about that. And we do share other campus things too. So like I said, we're just one center, but there are some really great other engagement opportunities for students. And so we'll definitely share those as well throughout the year.
Yeah, I also just want to jump in and say, so that link will bring you specifically to the newsletter, but also Ginsberg's website in general is a great place to just go in and poke around and see what gets your interest and what you might be interested in learning more about. And there's different links to if you want to talk to someone or you want to sign up for something, there's lots of links to look at on the website. So definitely, if you're interested in this, definitely look around on Ginsberg's website.
Any other questions? All right, no other questions. Maybe I can give some unsolicited advice that when you come to campus, I hope that you all will, of course, explore the campus, but also explore some of the different areas right off of campus. There are some really incredible gems, whether it's really incredible food that you can be finding, or some of the different nooks like the Ann Arbor Farmers Market, or heading to Zingerman's. Of course, there are those different pieces that you'll hear about, but we really are excited to welcome you to this community and hope that you will learn more about Ann Arbor, about Ypsilanti, which is also a really incredible city that's right next door to Ann Arbor, and even get to Detroit if you haven't been before. There are some really great things that are happening that we think are going to enrich your U of M experience, and we hope that you'll get connected to them. And so if there are no other questions, that ends our time today. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we're panelists, so we can kind of see that there are folks in the back end, but we hope that you'll come and visit us in the Ginsberg Center in the fall as you come to campus.